Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Endurance Physios podcast. My name is Dr. Sam Rockwater. I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Will Gonzaba. Howdy, Will.
What's up, Sam?
How are we doing over in Texas today?
Pretty good, man. We're actually on the tail end of a cold front that blew through this week, so I'm enjoying it,
Ooh,
dude.
nice.
Yeah,
Enjoy it before that
overcast.
summer heat kicks in.
Yeah, we're not
I like
quite
it.
there yet, so it's been pretty nice. Can't complain.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Today's topic is endurance athlete training camps. So we're just kind of going to talk about it in general, but also too, we'll kind of take a little bit deeper dive into triathlon just because it covers the swim, bike, and run portion of it. But we'll obviously talk about them as in training camps in general as a whole. Um, but Will, do you have any experience as like doing a training camp or running a training camp or like have had friends who've done training camps or like what's your level of like expertise slash what's your level of like uh knowledge about training camps?
Yeah, I mean, definitely familiar with them in the sense that endurance athletes will seek these out and do them. And endurance athletes at various levels, and I know that training camps can be sort of like destination type of things where people will travel to these spots to work with coaches for 3 or 4 days, or they could be a smaller scale and done locally. And both of them have their place. Personally, I've never done a training camp, nor have I really necessarily sought out to do one. I certainly like the idea of it, but I just hasn't really been anything that I've explored in too much detail in my life thus far. But certainly here in San Antonio, there are a few. In fact, this past year in February, the Paragon coaching group, which is this multi-sport triathlon, multi-sport coaching group, hosted their first one out in the hill country in February, and it was very well attended. It looked like it was awesome. So I think at least with that one, I would love to be involved in some way, whether that's as an athlete or as a provider, being able to offer some of my services there. But I do really like the idea of it. I think it's a really cool way to kind of get your excitement going into race season, right? And like to kind of learn some new things, improve form, get a little bit of a bump in fitness. So it seems like a really cool thing. What about for you, man? I mean, I know that up in Arizona, like that's like a hotbed for these things and a big destination place where people will travel. So, what's like over there for these training camps?
Yeah. At times I feel like every day I'm living in a training camp. um no, Arizona is definitely a big hotbed for endurance athlete training camps. I just like you have never actually gone to a training camp, but I have helped out with training camps. I've done PT work in training camps, and I've had tons of clients go to training camps. I've treated people like for the week in a training camp before. Sometimes when they come down, I've had some athletes come down for like a month prior to Kona, and I've treat them for that month leading up into Kona, that kind of thing. And so very familiar with the idea of training camps and how they're run and what they all involve and everything. Haven't personally done one, but I've gone on all the rides that they do. I know exactly kind of like what they're doing and what they're going for. So hopefully we can both
Mhm.
shed some light on training camps, um, and kind of what they look like, what they feel like, how they run, the fun parts, the not so fun parts maybe about them, and kind of shed some light on that. Um,
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man. So with the clients that you've had that have maybe done these, or just for endurance athletes that might be interested in this, like what are some of the things that people should look for in trying to find a training camp to participate in?
Yeah. So when a lot of the athletes are coming down to Arizona, most of the time they're looking for warm climate, someplace that has pretty regular sun. So it tends to be pretty sunny. The chance of rain is low. The chance of crappy cold weather is low. Um, that kind of thing. Most of the time when training camps are coming to Arizona, it is normally in the winter time or like early spring, when it's still really crappy where they live. They're sick of being on the trainer and on the treadmill and in the indoor pool, and they want some vitamin D on their skin, and so they come out to Arizona, and they can ride outside, they can run outside, and uh, I think there was one indoor lap pool in Tucson. Everything else is outdoors. So if that gives you any idea of the sunny and warm
That's
climate that it
crazy.
is, yeah. Also, too, people also oftentimes come because it tends to mimic the climate that they're trying to race in. Um, so I know that Tucson and Phoenix is a hotbed for triathletes leading up to um, Ironman World Championships in Kona, or when they were consistently in Kona, um, because it is a lot cheaper than Hawaii for a month, and also too, you can still get that kind of extreme heat, a little bit drier heat. Yes, Kona, Hawaii is on the ocean, so there's a little bit of humidity, but the wind that comes off of there is very similar to the wind in the desert, and it's hot like that. Um, Other places that people oftentimes will look for training camps. I've seen people go up to Flagstaff, Arizona, and do a training camp. Flagstaff is 7,200 feet, and so it's at the base of the at the like the base of the town, and then it all goes up from there. So I've seen people do a lot of running training camps up there for sure, just for the elevation. I've seen people do it in Sedona as well, Sedona, Arizona as well, a little bit lower, but beautiful, awesome, amazing trail running and biking up there. But sometimes they'll also do it just for the elevation aspect. I've seen people do it in Colorado as well. Normally in the summer in Colorado, definitely not in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
but normally in the summer for Colorado. I have seen some pro athletes go to Kona and do it in Hawaii or Maui before. I know that some athletes have gone to Texas prior to, so I've seen people train in like around the Houston area to mimic that super hot and humid environment as well. It is at sea level, just like Kona is. So again, with a lot of these triathletes, they'll try and kind of mimic that as best as possible. Um, I don't know if there's anything else that like you would normally look for in a training camp and or other destinations where you think training camps are pretty commonly held.
Yeah. Well, I'd say one thing that that we forgot to mention is that some of them have like event specific ones that are for the general public. Like Leadville is one that comes to mind. I don't know if they do this for the mountain bike course, but I know for the run they do. Where it's like if you buy the
Mm.
training camp, so if you pay whatever it is to go to the
Yeah,
3 day training
yeah,
camp,
yeah.
I think you automatically get a ticket into the event, and so that can make it pretty easy. I think to participate or find one that's suited for an event that you're training for, or to maybe get an entry into a race that we would otherwise need to be in a lottery or qualify for. So that's something to check out because I think if you're looking at some of these big ticket events like a Leadville, whether it's the mountain bike or the run,
Mm-hmm.
being able to have
The
some
lottery
experience
system.
like at elevation, yeah, like that could be really key for you in terms of your performance of the day when like most working athletes are not going to be able to probably carve time to go to Leadville twice in a year, like once on your own and then like once again through for the race. And so maybe doing it through an event twice is a little bit more feasible because you don't have to plan as much. So there's event specific ones that are like run by those race organizations. So that could be something to look into. The other
Yeah, that's
thing
a
that I
very
would
good
say
point.
what to look for, and maybe you could shed some light to it, is kind of the picking the timing of the event. Like when should you do these training camps in relation to your calendar year, and then like if you're doing it for a specific event, like when you should do it, and when you should do it. I'm thinking like another thing too is like even if it's not a formal training camp where like you're paying to like this organization to run it all for you. I know a lot of athletes here will go and like kind of do their own, like they'll do like a training camp weekend at Big Bend. And so they'll drive down to Big Bend Thursday night, to stay till Sunday, and they'll just do some trail runs that whole time through, in preparation for
Yeah.
late spring races. And so, anyway, just how that timing all works out with events. Do you have any like best practices for maybe selecting the timing of when to participate in these things?
Yeah, that's a great question because timing really does make a huge difference. And it's also going to be different elevation if you go and do like an altitude camp versus if you go and do just like a normal training camp. Um, altitude camps can vary. I'm not like the I just want to preface this, I'm not the leading expert in like knowing training and that kind of thing. However, from my experience, most people with elevation camps have gone out anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks prior to their event to try and get themselves a little bit of a bump in elevation and red blood cells and that kind of thing. Um, Otherwise, though, most people will come and do it almost as like a jump start to their season. So where they're kind of like more in the base phase of training, they'll just try and get like, hey, all right, I'm going to spend a long weekend, like what you mentioned, or hey, I'm going to spend these, 4 days, 5 days, or even a week sometimes. Hey, I just want to try and overload and get going. Um, Oftentimes, I normally say talk to your coach and figure out what your coach thinks is best and works best and has had experience with, um, because you can easily get overcooked in a training camp for
Mm-hmm.
sure. And I've seen people dig holes in training camps because they go, oh man, I got a week, I just gotta go ham here, I gotta gotta get especially in triathlon, I gotta get a swim, bike, and run in every single day. Oh, and also too, I got to strength train as well. And they go from, doing one workout, maybe two workouts a day to doing four, 3, 4 workouts in a day. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
too much. And then what happens is then they dig themselves a big fatigue hole. And then they come out of that training camp so dang fatigued and tired. So I do think it is really important, especially if you're working with a coach, to talk with them and figure out when is exactly is the best time to do it. And then make sure that they have a training plan for you during that camp. If you want to ramp up volume during that camp, that's okay, but you need to have someone watching how much volume you're getting so then you're not actually digging yourself a deficit. Um, in general,
Yeah,
I would say
it's not
base.
just
Good.
it's not just like a green light to, hey, I've allotted 3 or 4 days to focus on my training. It's not necessarily the green light that you're going to train all day for 3 or 4 days, because for most athletes, most age groupers, like that's just way outside of your realm to produce all of a sudden and then to recover from on the back end. So that's probably a negative training effect overall if you go at it with that mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, can you imagine, you sit at a desk job, you do your, maybe one workout in the morning, maybe, quick workout in the evening, and then, you go and just hammer yourself for 5 days. You get so fatigued and tired, and then you go back to your desk job again. Like you're really actually
Yeah, right back to it.
detraining. And yeah, I mean, you're really not doing great.
Yeah.
um I would say in general though, most people will try and do this 8 to 12 weeks out from a race. Or I've seen people, they'll either do it as that as like a kind of mid base phase or like a big volume phase. Or I've seen people where in the case of when I was living down in Tucson and people were prepping for Ironman World Championships in Kona, they would come down there for the last month, um, and get heat acclimation, which we had a podcast on recently about that. But get
Mhm.
acclimatized to the heat, um, and then kind of finish up their training, kind of sharpen the knife there. Most of the time when they come down, they're not doing an insane volume um, right before a race. Normally they're kind of peaking for their training, kind of doing some higher intensity stuff, maybe getting used to that heat a little bit, being outside a little bit more, which zaps a little bit more energy. So there's a lot of different ways that you can really take that training camp. I know that was super long-winded answer for the question, but it
Oh
really
yeah.
kind of depends. At elevation, you want to give yourself enough time to recover. When you go to a training camp, you want to give yourself enough time to recover or be really smart about it as you're leading up into a race.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, I think it's an appropriate length answer because it can just depend on a lot of things. Elevation, what event you're doing. Is it a triathlon training camp? Is it a cycling? Is it a trail running? Like, what is it? All of those things are going to impact how you answer the timing of all of that. Um, so just to give some people with a little bit more insight onto these things, like how are they? Do you know much about the structure on how these training camps are physically run? Like, what do they do?
Um,
What do you do in a training camp?
yeah, yeah. I'm going to talk through a triathlon training camp because that's the ones that I have the most experience with. Um, Now, I imagine run and bike training camps are essentially the same, minus the swim or minus the bike or whatever, or both. But essentially, you have your major components. So we're just going to break it down for triathlon. You have your swim component, your bike component, and your run component. Okay. So swims, you're going to do locally, normally at a pool. You're going to find some sort of aquatic center. Um, some people will seek out short course or 25 yards or 25-meter pools. Oftentimes, it's a bonus if you can find a 50-yard pool or 50-meter pool as well. Those are kind of things that you want to potentially look for, but you're going to try and go and do your swims at some sort of local pool. For the bike, finding good bike routes is absolutely key and critical to having a good training camp. If you're on a busy 2-lane highway that has, a 1-foot shoulder, that's not, and, cars ripping by you at 55, 60 miles an hour. A, that's not really safe. And B, that's not really going to have you're not really going to have a good time with that. I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people will try and find wider roads. They'll try and find, some sort of climbs or back roads, or, sometimes they'll do some gravel stuff too if you're on just purely a cycling camp. But oftentimes you're trying to find a mix of terrain. So you want to find some stuff that's really easy and some stuff that's really hard and challenging. So, for example, I'm going to keep coming back to Tucson just because that's where I've had my experience with it, Tucson, Arizona. But also too, it's an absolute one of probably the best places in the U.S. to have a training camp. Um, you have a mix of hard and easy terrain. You have this big mountain called Mount Lemon. It's 31 miles uphill. It's 5 to 6 mile grade, pretty dang consistent. Yes, it does have some steeper pitches and stuff like that, but you can get that. It also goes up to 9,000 feet, so you can get some elevation if you want. And you can do some hill repeats up higher up on Mount Lemon, so you can get elevation. You can get the hard climbing. You can also get descending practice as well. It's an hour-ish straight descend if you go from the tip top all the way down, which is a ton of fun. And also too, you got to be careful in the summer because your brakes will get a little hot as you come down. But also too, you have this trail called the Loop, and essentially what it is it's 55 miles direct all the way around the city of Tucson. But then you also have arms, so it's like 120, 130 miles or something crazy like that. But it's bike only, and it's relatively flat. So if you want something super easy, you have that to do a recovery day, right? Or hey, I just want you to go out for an hour easy spin. Perfect. You can go out on that easy terrain. So biking, making sure you find those good routes, a good mix of easy terrain and hard terrain, maybe some climbs, maybe some elevation if you can, um, anything like that. Um, in terms of run, same thing in terms of terrain, but also too, oftentimes people try and mix in either doing like a trail, um, doing like a trail run or like a pavement run to just alter the amount of joint force or amount of force on your joints as you're running. Those oftentimes tend to be really good um, in terms of finding runs. Find places where if you can go for like a group run. Or I know Tucson also is popular. I forgot to mention this in the bike. They have this bike race, or not really race, it's a group ride, but it might as well be called a race. It's called the Shootout. and goes just
Hmm.
south of Tucson. Um, very famous group race. But if you can find group runs, group races, team up with local bike shops or local run shops, find that kind of thing. All of those things are going to be really key. Those are going to be like your base components um, to a training camp, where you're going to have your basic training, your swim, your bike, your run training. Um, there are other things as well that like go into a training camp. But before I go there, is there anything that you can think of to talk about like with swim, bike, and run
I think
when like in terms of like a training camp and finding that training camp and or things that go along?
Yeah, I mean the only thing that would I would add to the triathlon one is that if is open water swimming. That's it. Like if it's going to be ocean versus
Mm,
lake or
yep.
whatever it is, right? So I imagine that if you're training for a specific event, like you're probably going to want a open water swim opportunity at your training camp. That's the only thing that I can think of in terms to add to one that's triathlon specific, but nothing
Awesome.
more for the bike and run.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really good point. And I totally forgot about that, but that's a very good point. There is a local lake about an hour south. People don't normally go to it, but um, you're right though. That's definitely a really good,
Yeah, yeah.
really good idea to do. Um, Other things that are normally or can be incorporated into an endurance athlete training camp.
Hmm.
Um, Strength training, depending on people's access to gym and or how much they value the strength training. I think it's still important to be able to strength train. Oftentimes people want to be outside and working out because they're at a place where it's warm and sunny and they normally don't live there. So most people don't want to do strength training, but oftentimes that's super important. Um, I've also too seen training camps, and this is where I have some experience with it. Is that I've actually been called in to do some like body work and PT work, physical therapy work with those athletes. So I'll essentially go in and I'll either do some recovery modalities, I'll do some soft tissue, I'll do some injury assessment. I've done injury screenings at triathlon camps before. I've done some strength testing, so like with a handheld dynamometer, which is a ton of fun. Everyone kind of gets into it, and it's kind of eventually becomes a like a low key strength competition, and people's competitive juices get flowing with that. But that's a lot of fun. And oftentimes, the goal of that is, hey, let's see where you're weak, let's see where you're strong. Let's figure out a plan and see if this will help you, and or hey, good information to know. Just know, you're more prone to injury at X, Y, and Z muscles or whatever it happens to be. But that PT side, obviously, as we're both physical therapists, I mean, I really enjoy that. Going out to those training camps is a ton of fun, and doing that and helping people that way. The recovery part is super fun too. Whether that be dry needling or bringing a pair of Normatex or just some soft tissue work to kind of loosen them up. That all helps as well. Um, I've also seen it too where there's been a nutritionist or nutrition coach there. And I even saw this one
Nice.
training camp where they had a nutritionist and a private chef. I was like, hell yeah, this sounds awesome. Um, yeah, and so essentially, what was happening is that they would like look at people's training peaks, or they look at their past training for bigger volumes and rides, and then they would look at how much calorie expenditure they had, and then how much they took in, and then essentially try and calculate that out, and then the chef would literally cook them meals um, for
Yeah.
that, which was insane to see. I mean, that's like pro tour cyclist like level. But also too, I've seen it where they bring in a chef and they just do family style, and people eat until they're full or whatever they need, or that kind
Hmm.
of thing. That's really cool to have. That's definitely like an extra luxury and expense for sure. I've also too seen it where age groupers will do uh, age grouper camps will have like a special like guest lecturers that come and like talk and like Q&A and that kind of thing. I know Ben Hoffman has done a few of those before, from my time working with him, and he'll go and answer questions and talk a little bit about his training and like what to do and some like transition tips or training tips or racing tips or whatever. I've also seen Heather Jackson do that before as well, just locally in the Tucson area. From I know both of them, so just knowing that they've talked with those type of people before, which has been awesome. But oftentimes those special guest lectures too can bring a lot to like a training camp, and also too it's something kind of fun. Like you've had a hard day of training, you can kind of kick back. People can have a beer or wine or
Yeah,
an
definitely. I
athletic
think the
brew if you
one other
want,
thing,
non-alcoholic stuff, and then
yeah, I've seen
listen
only
to
one other
and
thing
kind of
I could
take
give
it all
offhand,
in and kind
which
of be in
was
that
bike fitting. Air
bubble
dancing is one thing
for
that I've
for
seen
that
as
week, and
well,
that tends to be
as
pretty
well as
fun.
like swim form assessment, like we'll look at pool videos, like camp. So I've
Uh,
seen those two things
any
added in
any
to this as well.
other
So just like a little bit more
things?
deeper
Go
assessments
ahead.
of equipment and form at various levels. So yes,
Mm,
yeah. This That'd be fun. This was, I think they did more like aero testing versus true bike fitting
yeah,
is what they were
yeah, no,
doing.
absolutely. I
At
think
least for this one
swim
group that
form
did
definitely I've seen that.
that test here locally.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I think
bike
that's what they were
fitting I
doing
haven't
versus a
seen
true fit.
before, but I can totally see
Um,
how that can be
all right, cool. But I
like
think that that gives
beneficial.
people like a
Most
good
of the
insight of
time,
how they're
I've
run.
at least the people
As I
I've seen, like
reflect
they've
on it,
had their
like
bikes.
okay, I've definitely
At least
never
they should have
done a
their bikes
formal
dialed in
training.
by that
Typically,
point.
it's basic training. That was
Um,
the main thought.
and then obviously
Honestly,
like
dude, it's
a
the time.
gait
We were
analysis,
there
like
for
that would be
continuing matches,
awesome.
and
I'd
everyone
love to
we were
do
just
like a
really cool
gait
to what
analysis
we
on
were
a
doing
group.
biting until anymore most of the days. But it was nice to just have the blocked time to only
Oh,
really think
sure.
about
That would
that
be
for the
cool.
most part, right? Like you don't have any work responsibilities. And I know that when I would leave those events or those days, I would always feel really fit because for me, even though the amount of riding we did wasn't insane, it was a big bump for me to get like 10 hours in those 4 days or whatever we would do, right? Or 3 days. That was a big bump for me. So I'd always leave feeling really fit and good afterwards. And so I think that that's an important takeaway too, is like these things can be as formal and as education as in depth as you want them to be. But there's also a lot to say for just being able to have 3 days or 4 days of just more training time that and less mental load than what you would have in your day to day. So things that you could potentially just plan to do on your own. And there's a lot of value to that too. All right, Sam. So I guess another question just to end with is, what do you think, man? Are they these training camps any fun? Should we be seeking these out?
Man, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like a lot of work, No, they're absolutely. Everyone that I've talked to said that they're an absolute blast. I've treated a few people where they literally come every single year for like that 1 week, and they'll call me up and they'll be like, "Hey, I'm in town this week. Can I get some
Me
treatment
too.
and stuff like that?" And by all means, absolutely. And it's always fun to go to those environments.
Yeah.
and talk with those athletes and be in those rooms because people are hyped up. The vibes are good, and people are enjoying their times. They're not thinking about work like what you said. They're more focused on just being there, having a good time, going for some swims, some bikes, some runs. you know um I know, I think of it. I mean, it wasn't really a training camp, but when me and you, went up to Portland those couple times, like, dude, I was pumped because I was ready to go for rides after the class. I'm like, okay, this is great and all. Like, class is good. Like, good to like touch up on my bike fit, and then I'm like, hell yeah, like let's go ride. And then you talk about riding, and you talk about other, I mean,
Hmm.
obviously we geeked out about PT and stuff like that, but people will geek out about triathlon or running or swimming or whatever it is. And
Yeah, again, man, like
I
I've
think
never done a formal
it's
one,
just a
but
fun
the
time.
time
And
that we
if
spent
you're
like in
yes,
Portland, those
sometimes
two
training
years doing
camps
that
cost some
stuff, like man, that
money.
was
They're a little
so much
can be
fun,
kind of
and I loved
expensive,
it
but
so much, just getting to ride and
oftentimes though
explore
they
somewhere
tend to be
different,
very
and
much
just not
worth
having
it,
the mental
worthwhile
load of
for
having to worry about anything
the
else other than
experience,
riding
and
my
also
bike.
too
And it
for
didn't really matter. Like, it didn't
just
matter
the
if you were,
camaraderie, and
the ride
finding
went
new
an hour
routes.
late.
And
It didn't matter if it
shoot,
went
I
two
mean,
hours
you're
late. Like,
taking
you
your
could do
bike
whatever
a
you
place
wanted
where
to,
you
and
never
that was
probably
great. So
would have taken your
I think
bike.
people should seek out
um like,
opportunities to do
I
this
think
again,
it's
even if it's
it's
informal.
absolutely
I think it's
fun
good for your
and
headspace and just
worthwhile.
kind of
And
a good time to
I
get
was lucky
excited about training.
that I
So
could
yes, I highly
ride
highly
those
recommend it.
those rides like every day or every week, if I wanted to. So I think they're fun. I don't know about you, but I would say they're absolutely fun. They're worth it, an absolute blast.
It was awesome. Work trip. Yep. Yeah, work trip. I'm down.
Well, I think that begs the question that, like, I think that we should, at least me and you, and maybe if other people listening want to, I think that we should try and figure out like some way to do like a long
No.
weekend or something like that every year where, you go and
Yeah, that
ride
sounds awesome.
somewhere where, you know, you we haven't been
Please.
before, and like just try it out, like get an Airbnb and like hang out for a little bit and just go ride, because I don't know about you, I had a blast doing that, and I know you did as well. So I think that we should do that. We just need to tell our wives that it's a work trip, quote unquote work trip. Um Work trip. Yep. Yep. So maybe we need to find a place. So yeah. So if anyone has any good ideas of other training camps besides Tucson, Arizona, and Texas, love to go ride somewhere else as well. Just again to like expand our horizons. We don't need that warm and sunny climate. Actually, rain sounds pretty good right about now, as it's about 100 and something degrees here today. But
Yeah, just on Instagram at
yeah,
Will
but
Gonzaba or at my clinic's
anyways, if anyone
Instagram
has
at
any
Almost
ideas,
Park
let us
Physio,
know.
OLMOS
Comments and or reach out to
PHYSIO.
us and tell us what you guys think. Otherwise, though, Will, thanks for another great episode. Always awesome talking with you and talking about endurance sports. If you guys wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe if you can, and even better yet, share this episode with a friend. And that really, really
Thanks,
helps us
y'all.
grow, and it helps us get this information out to other people. If you guys have other ideas too about what we want to talk about or what you want us to talk about, let us know. Put them in the comments, and we'll get back to you. Otherwise, Will, where can they reach you at if they have questions for you? Awesome. If you have questions for me, you're more than welcome to reach out as well. Instagram is probably the best. I am at the Endurance Physio. The and Endurance both have an E in it, so it's two E's right in a row there. The Endurance Physio. Otherwise, we will see you guys next week. Peace.